Welcome to the fourth and last session of Citibank New York. I left Citibank New York at the end of 1998. I had joined Citibank in 1981, so it was almost 18 years that I spent with Citibank. This is going to be the last session, which covers the period of 1998. So in 1998, I was heading strategy and quality for the financial institutions business globally for Citibank. And one of the things that struck me in funds transfer was that funds transfers were very complicated because, if you were a bank in, say, Thailand, and you had a customer who wanted to send money to Mexico, you had really no idea about the banks in Mexico, the geography of Mexico, where the person wanted to send money, and so on. So what you had to do was you had to find out how to route the money to that person who was the beneficiary in Mexico. So you had to find out, okay, the money would go through Citibank. So your bank account with Citibank would get debited and the dollar amount would get credited to some bank, which would be a correspondent bank of that bank in Mexico. Now that bank would send the money to the correspondent bank's head office. And then that head office would send the money to the branch office. And then the branch office would credit the beneficiary's account. Now, as you can see, there were many, many steps involved in this process. And it became that could lead to a lot of delays and a lot of errors along the process. So then when I was thinking about it and I was watching the flow and I was watching the internet and I got acquainted with email, when I started looking at email, one of the things which struck me was that the email was a globally unique address. So I sort of asked the question saying, why couldn't I route funds transfers just to an email address? And then the beneficiary could put in the information as to where they wanted that money. So then as the sender or the sender's bank or whatever, as the sender, I would not need to know where the beneficiary banked, and this could be a global system. So I guess I was one of the few thinkers at that time, maybe not the only one, who thought that email being unique could be quite disruptive for funds transfers. So I started talking about this, especially with my brother who was in Silicon Valley. And though I was in the US, I was on the East Coast and Silicon Valley is on the West Coast. And it's a totally different world. And the startup world is very different from, say, working for Citibank. So I had very little exposure. I did not know much about Silicon Valley or startups or anything of that nature. So when I started talking to my brother and one of his friends, they sort of encouraged me that saying, wow, this idea could be very good. So why don't you come to Silicon Valley? They are always looking for big ideas and things like that. And, who knows, you should probably leave Citibank and pursue your ideas. So I was saying, leave Citibank? I mean, are you crazy? I have such a good thing going here. It was almost like I was like Bilbo Baggins in this story of the Lord of the Rings and having a very cushy life. But my brother managed to convince me to at least explore the Silicon Valley option. So in the summer of 1998, I came with just a couple of presentations, and my idea on how to use this was more to do with cross-border transfers and to compete with companies like Western Union. It was not exactly around the eBay and power sellers and the domestic funds transfers, which actually became eBay's, PayPal's beachhead and big product. And cross-border transfers came much later. But anyway, I came with this little 1-2 page presentation, and um, you know, my brother who knew people in Silicon Valley just sent that across. And I think the great thing about Silicon Valley is that even if you do not know people, but you come through some kind of networking, very, very senior people in Silicon Valley are very excited about meeting you. And the standard thing is that they'll call you for breakfast, and if they like what you're saying and you're impressive, then the breakfast will continue. Otherwise, they'll get a phone call and they will abandon the breakfast very quickly. So in my case, the meetings were very productive. They actually invited me over later for detailed meetings in the afternoon. And my brother told me that, wow, this idea seems to have a lot of legs. So, you should really investigate this and think about uh, taking the plunge and leaving Citibank and, trying things out. And we had long meetings and he was trying to convince me, and I was not really very, very convinced. So I thought, if this idea has legs, why don't I, since I was reasonably senior in Citibank, talk with my boss and his boss's boss and about this idea. And they also liked it because it was a good idea. And through a couple of levels, this was the idea that ultimately became PayPal was presented to the board of Citigroup in 1998. And then the feedback that I got was that the idea was really appreciated by the board, but they felt that one, why should they cannibalize funds transfers, which was quite an important business for Citibank, because if it made it easier and cheaper and so on and so forth, then there could be a substantial loss of revenue for Citibank. And the other thing was that how would they do this disruptive idea? Because it didn't necessarily fit into any one division of Citibank. Because in some ways here we were getting consumers to directly be able to transfer money internationally without going through a bank. So was this a consumer banking business? Was this a corporate banking business? We were all from the corporate bank. So it was all kind of a mess, and it became fairly clear to me that Citibank would not pursue this idea. But gradually, I was falling more and more in love with this idea. And then Citigroup was also merging with Travelers. And because of the merger, they were looking to lay off people and give them a package. So I sort of put two and two together, and I requested my boss to give me the package so that I could leave Citibank with a golden handshake and pursue this idea. And we'll explore how that transpired in the next slide. So then I kind of dropped a bombshell for my wife, my friends, that I was thinking of leaving Citibank. And my wife, my friends, they all tried to convince me as to what a stupid thing I was doing. But I was trying to tell them, and this was the calculation in my mind, that look, at that stage I was about 42 or so. It's this midlife crisis. You sort of wonder, are you going to spend the next 20 years of your life working for the same company? I'd already worked for Citigroup for 18 years. And, I was kind of getting bored. And the more senior I got, the more politics were required. And I wasn't very good at that. I wanted to try something new. And then my logic was that if I understand the internet, I was pretty sure the internet would succeed, even though my idea may succeed or fail. And I wanted to try my hand at doing a startup. And I felt that people like my brother and other people, and I had confidence in myself that I could learn, even though I didn't know startups, and try and do a startup. And if I failed, then after 2 or 3 years, I could always get back to corporate life. Because at that stage, I would be around 45 and not too old to get another job. Maybe with Citibank, maybe outside Citibank. So to me, it was a pretty good calculated decision. And I left Citibank in 1998 and started exploring, trying to do my own company, which ultimately got named SipPay. But that's another story for the next session, and which will start uh, my transition to PayPal, and it'll form part of the PayPal story. Thank you very much for listening to me. And we will continue these series now with the PayPal story, which in some ways is a very interesting story and the biggest disruptive innovation that I did, which helped me retire at the age of 45.